In this final video for the Week 5 activity, we have a number of steps in order to complete the task at hand. The first step is to convert these objects to smart objects. Each one of these layers we want to resize, and since we don't know how many times we're going to be resizing the object, we want to make sure that Photoshop doesn't lose pixel quality for each one of these layers every time we play around with it. I've already converted the F and the I layers to smart objects, and you can tell that because they have this little icon in the bottom right of each one of these layers. I'm going to continue and do the same thing. I'm going to select the N layer, I'm going to right click and convert to smart object. I'm going to click on E, click the right button and convert to smart object. I now have 4 objects that have been converted to smart object, and now I'm ready to resize them. Now your baselines and your lines that you've created, you may find that you need to change them to suit your aesthetic. Let's first begin by looking at the letter F. So I'm going to click on the layer for the letter F. I'm going to move to the Move tool, and I'm also going to zoom in a bit just to make it a little bit easier to see. And now I'm ready to begin working. In order to maintain aspect ratio while you're resizing objects, you want to make sure that you hold down the Shift key. I'm going to resize by holding down the Shift key, hovering until I get the double-sided arrow, click, drag, and hold until I'm at the size that I wish. Now I've set a caps height that I think works nicely. This is a nice height for a caps height, and this is going to be my X height. When I'm happy with the size of my F, I'm going to click on the Commit button or hit Enter, and I'm ready to move on to the letter I. And I can start resizing this. But I do notice that my X line isn't really where I'd like it to be. And as I'm hovering over that guide, you'll notice that my cursor changes to this double-sided line with 2 arrows on either side. I'm going to click while it's in that mode and move it up to the top part of the middle part of my letter. In this case, this is going to make everything line up nicely. You'll notice that it's not exactly at the halfway point. But that is just an aesthetic thing. And considering that each one of these letters is from a different font, we're really kind of playing around with things and just doing it from an aesthetic standpoint. So now I want to hold on to the Shift key, I want to move to the corner, click, and resize that object. Remember, if you hold down the Shift key, you're going to resize while maintaining the aspect ratio. When you're happy with that, you can click Enter and you can move on to the next letter. Once again, I want to resize by holding the Shift key, click, drag until I'm at the height that I wish, and when I'm happy, click Enter. Finally, the letter E, Shift, resize until I'm at the size that I wish. And once I've got all these 4 letters, now I can start working on the kerning. The kerning is the space between the letters here. I can see that the E and the N are closer together than the N and the I and the F, but at the same time, it's still quite a ways away. So now what I want to do is I want to play around with the kerning. You can use your left and right arrow keys to kind of play around with that until you get a spacing and a relationship between the objects that works nicely. And all I'm doing is using my arrow keys here. You can zoom in a bit, take a look at the 4 letters together. If you find that your guides are a distraction, go up here to View, and you want to View Clear Guides. Now I'm able to look at my object without having the distraction of the guides. I'm going to zoom out, so I'm going to Control or Command minus to zoom out completely. And now I need to crop this image. I'm going to go over to my crop tool, which is the 5th tool down, click on the crop tool, and I'm going to change the ratio. Right now it's set to a 1:1 square. I'm going to click on Ratio so that I can dial in my own ratio. I'm going to click in a 1:1.5 ratio, and actually I want to make sure that it's a horizontal ratio. So I'm actually going to click on this to swap height and width. And now I have a 1.5:1 ratio. Now, what I want to do is I want to place Fine in the middle, and I want to crop it down. Clearly I don't need all of this. You want to play around until you're happy with the relationship of the object to the background. That looks about right. I'm going to hit Enter and commit to the change. Or you can click on the commit current crop operation, and now I'm happy. All right, so here is my 4-letter word with my plain white background. So the next step is to color the background. The first step to do that is to go over here to the bottom right of your adjustments layer. You're going to find that right next to the delete icon, which is that little icon that looks like a trash bin, there's a little paper with the bottom left side folded up. That's the create a new layer icon. I'm going to click on create a new layer. Now I'd like to click, drag, and drop that to the bottom. I'm going to double click and rename this background. And while I have this layer selected, now I'm going to go ahead and find the paint bucket tool to paint this background. The paint bucket tool is actually located nested beneath an existing tool, the gradient tool. So you want to click on the corner, bottom right corner, that caret, for the gradient tool, and you'll find the paint bucket tool nested beneath that one. Now the color that is currently set for my paint bucket tool, the foreground color, is the color that's default. It's the last one that I used. In this case, it's kind of this turquoise color. In your case, if you've never used this tool before, it might be black. To change this color, all you need to do is double click, and then of course here you can use your sliding scale to select any one of these color schemes that you think might work. You can navigate around until you find a color that you think is more complementary, perhaps, or perhaps something that you think might work. Pink, blues, yellow. Go through until you find something that you like. Actually, I think I'm going to go with kind of a yellowish, a nice yellowish color, maybe a peachy color. I like this. I'm going to click OK. Now nothing has happened, but I do have my paint bucket tool selected. Now all I need to do is literally dump the paint onto the screen. When I click, that's what Photoshop is doing. So now I have my 4-letter word with my background color, and now I'm ready to save this document. Now before I save this document, a reminder to all of you, when you are uploading large files to Slate, it will take a long time. One way to save yourself a little bit of aggravation is to change the image size. If we click on image size, we can adjust the pixels in the image. We actually don't need any more than 1024 wide, or 1024 high if that's your largest of the two numbers. In this case, I can see that my pixels are 958 by 638. So I don't need to make any adjustments here, but if your pixel density is higher than 1024, you're going to want to change the width to 1024, and it will automatically recalculate it for you, provided that you have this lock here. If you don't have the lock, you want to make sure that this button here is clicked, and it will automatically calculate it for you. So here it's converted it to centimeters, but 958 pixels is what you want, and I'm going to say OK. I'm now ready to save this document. I'm going to go File, Save As, and I want to save this as a JPEG for the purpose of this assignment. Now before I save it to JPEG, I would like to mention to anybody who wants to save this as a Photoshop file, you can do that as well. You only want to upload the JPEG to Slate. But if ever you want to go back into this document and play with the layers, you need to save it as a separate Photoshop document and make sure that you have your layers checked. So you go ahead and name the document, Photoshop, Layers, and then click Save. In this case, I need to save this as a JPEG document. It's my 4-letter word, so I'm going to say Chantal. I'm going to call this Fine, and I'm going to make sure that I change it from a Photoshop file to a JPEG. Now, at this point I'm going to say Save. I'm going to accept the standard JPEG options that are existing as my default, and I'm going to say OK.